If you were an Englishman or a Frenchman shopping for a watch in the mid to late 20th century, you would most likely be looking at the likes of Seiko, Omega, or Longines. Those are just some of the most recognizable names in watchmaking, renowned for their quality, reliability, or complexity. Travel east of the Iron Curtain and you're looking at catalogs full of Payots, Raketas, Chaikas, Slavas, etc. From the Second World War all the way up until the 1980s, it was, without a doubt, the golden age of the humble wristwatch. There was, however, a third playing field between those two, and it was the ever-interesting Yugoslavia. Now, I am not qualified to compare the then with the now, if simply on the basis that I was not alive during the socialist days. I can however guarantee you that anyone who was alive at the time knew of a watch by the name Darwil. A brand so popular a song was written about it, yet a brand you've likely never heard of unless you live in the Balkans. Today I am going to tell you the story of the rise, the fame, and the inevitable fall of Darwil. Darwil's origins can be traced back roughly to the year 1910, when, according to the website, Darko Vilfan founded the brand with the help of Pierre Caprara, founder of the tennis group. Darwil was positioned as a sub-brand in that arrangement. Actual production, however, seemingly started several decades later, with some pocket watches showing up in the first half of the 20th century, but without a certain date, the wristwatches can only be placed in the late 50s or early 60s onwards. The company was headquartered in Grenchen, Switzerland, right from the start, allowing them to oversee the whole production. And soon after, a store was opened in Trieste, Italy. Trieste was at the time a shopping capital of the world, attracting many from across Europe and tens of thousands of people every week from Yugoslavia. Thanks to heavy advertising in Yugoslavian papers and television, people were soon packing their families and going to visit the so-called Darwil Palace. Attracted by the supposed Swiss quality and Italian charm, Yugoslavian watch dealers selling Polyots and Vostoks were suddenly in trouble. What made Darwil so popular was their branding and pricing. They touted the genuine Swiss quality for an affordable price, and while they weren't cheap, they weren't entirely out of reach of the working class. As one forum user recounts, it was a lot more affordable than an Amiga or a Doxa, but quality-wise they weren't all that different. Darwil's prices weren't exorbitant. Those who could buy one certainly had more money than the average person. Those who couldn't usually got them as gifts and loved to show them off. Unlike Omega, Darwil never did make their own movements, cases, nor dials. But, to be fair, neither did most of the Swiss-made watches of the period. They bought their movements from powerhouses such as Unitas, FHF, and Valjoux, all of them known for their excellent quality and precision. Some of their cases are even made by none other than Squall, and their dials really weren't unlike those you could find in far more expensive watches. In their heyday, their catalog ranged from the most simple and elegant of hand-on models titled the Special Flat series to the most complicated of racing chronographs, the likes of which weren't very common in Croatia. Special Flat was by far the most popular range. Unfortunately, those two words are about as clear as the image gets. In the beginning, there was the Special Flat Lux series, and then the name changed to Lux with an E. After those came the Special Flat World series, and all were followed by a weird set of numbers. Those letters and numbers appeared on a variety of different dials, cases, and movements, seemingly without a clear line drawn. And no, there doesn't seem to be a connection with the year of production. A slight ray of hope does appear in the form of model numbers on the back of their cases, such as 7041, 7050, and 7066, which do match the numbers stamped on their movements. And those numbers correspond to the movement models sometimes. The line was additionally supported by a matching ladies model appropriately called the Lady, followed by the same nonsensical numbers. Sometime in the late 1970s, production of the Special Flat series stopped, although their sales continued, and they were replaced by a new series, My Lord, and the matching My Lady. Models were also produced outside of those ranges, going by the names of Snowstar, Luisidor, and Super Automatic, to name a few. Things shifted slightly entering the mid-70s, styles matched the times, and movements were still of high quality. As for their cases, most were electroplated rather than being made of steel. Many plated in gold or chrome. Having the luxury of retrospective, they have proved to be of very high quality, holding up far better than the cases of their rivals. The Special Flat series offered no water resistance ratings, of course, but the more expensive models cased in Squall offered the same quality as you would find in a Doxa or a Blancpain. Their movements were reliable workhorses as well, and while it's not spectacular in finishing, many continue to tick reliably to this day, and watchmakers all working on them, FHF 76, FHF 81, Pesilk 7050, Unitas 6325, Unitas 6310, and AS 1890 are just some of the movements of theirs I have personally encountered on my watch collecting journey. With the exception of the far rarer models such as the Mars 71, 007, and the many divers I haven't had the pleasure of holding, that should more or less paint the picture of the kind of brand Darwil was. They picked their parts very, very well. Most people fondly recall the days of looking up at their dad's Darwil, or even getting one of their own. Nowadays, when I think of Darwil, I think of my youth. That watch has made me through a lot of happy moments, and I never had an issue with it. I got it in 1984, I was 15 at the time, and it went through all sorts of crazy shit with me. They became a household name, and you would seldom find a family without at least one Darwil on wrist. Over 3 million were sold in the period between 1960 and 1980. 2 million of those approximately coming from the Darwil Palace. This number absolutely dwarfed that of their competition, and not just Soviet, brands like Omicron and Loretta who are more or less playing the same game. Regardless of this success, Darwil's end came all the same as it did for many of the other smaller Swiss brands. There were some attempts to compete in the oncoming quartz age, but Darwil never did find its place in the modern world. Those who had them loved them, but the oncoming quartz watches were cheaper, more reliable, and more accurate. To the average Yugoslavian, that was all that mattered at a time of rising tensions which came following the death of its leader, Josip Broz Tito. For Darwil, there was an additional change of ownership into Fostfontaine's hands. Headquarters moved to Chiasso, Switzerland, and the name was changed to Darwil Factory SA. What followed soon was the closing of the Darwil Palace in Trieste in December of 1982. 10 years later, the name was changed again to Montres Choisy SA, now headquartered in Biel, and in 2002, the company closed its doors completely. Another 10 years later, in 2012, the brand was revived, and is now selling reissues of their most popular models, but unfortunately they are similar only in looks. One should also be aware of the watches sold under the Darwil name with a V instead of a W, as the two are not related and the former sells the usual run-of-the-mill quartz watches. Much like many others then, Darwil has seemingly met its end for good, but certainly remains as a cornerstone of the wristwatch culture in the Balkan region. Thank you. Hey, it's the rambling portion of the video where I just kind of sit back and talk about the production process and whatnot. So this is my first step into something like this, something with a story, something where research is involved, and as I said, I really have a lot of these Darwils now, and I wanted to film something about them. The thing is, I didn't find as much as I was thinking I would, which is both a blessing and a curse. I feel like I would have loved to make the video a bit more detailed, a bit of a deeper dive into the story, but I think this has absolutely saved me in terms of editing, in terms of writing something concise, something to the point, so to speak. But overall, I'm more or less happy with the end result. Better done than perfect. I have to keep reiterating that to myself more than anything. I don't really know what's next. I never do. Just kind of what I feel like doing. And yeah, this whole project start to finish really was like a week or two of work, maybe like at most 2 weeks, as I got home from college. And I should really say, over the course of researching this, handling the watches, opening them up, I've really just developed a deep liking for Darwil. I have to say, I'm currently wearing one. I'm wearing the tank, the gold tank, and I've just kind of fallen in love with it, I'll be honest. I had worn it for like 4 days straight a week ago, which is not very common for me. I tend to just rotate every single day through watches, and they're just really solid watches. Like Omicrons left a bad taste in my mouth because of their cases specifically. They're made of an alloy, and that alloy is very prone to breaking, just snapping off, and you basically cannot find an Omicron with a good case. I have one in my collection. I have a couple of them actually, but they're not as common as Darwil's. And I've just kind of been trying to save as many of these as I can. 3 million made. I can only estimate around 1 million are left at best. I mean, there's a lot of them, of course, and the 3 million number and the 2 million numbers and all of the numbers and all of the stats and all the data is so murky and such an unknown, really. People just speculate, like whatever I've been reading, it's just people speculation. And even from my own research, opening these watches up and looking into them, I've not been able to connect all that many dots. Even something like the movement models, right? 7066 being this or that. Like 7066 is an FHF 81, but I've seen that same number stamped on different movements. I believe I have a 7066 that is actually an out of shield movement. I don't get it. I really don't. Something smells smelly, That's about it. Thank you, and see ya.